All right, welcome to this third installment of the Aged Autumn Design Paper tests. I'm going to go full page here, which I usually don't do. I don't do a lot of full page tabloid size 11 by 17 size scenes, but this one, it seems like it would lend itself to that because a lot of this imagery has already been established here with this big long swag here. You can cut this in half like this and utilize this top portion and lower portion, and that would make a pretty cool foundation as far as the start of a scene. But I thought I can do something pretty fast on this one, full page. Now I see this probably as a piece of paper that's, it seems like this is the natural kind of format of it. It has a shallow depth of field. It has this kind of almost like a wood grain kind of peeling bark type of look right here. But I'm going to use this kind of this slight S curve here to represent some kind of natural, I don't know, patterning in for water. Okay, so one of the things that's different for me is I'm going to use set number 41 here, but I usually balance things off, so I would stamp these trees right here on the left and on the right side, but I have this swag coming down here, and I don't want to eradicate that by just having another one of these right over the top of it. At least early on, I'm trying to work with the imagery within the scene. After I start using these, a lot, I might just stamp over the top of them, what's the harm type of thing. But I want to kind of work within the parameters of the given composition for these early tests here. So let's do that. I'm going to go with a lot of set number 41. I don't know if I'll use anything else in this scene here, but let's see what we can come up with. I might need some additional imagery for my foreground down here. If after I stamp everything out, I don't feel that it's kind of balanced enough. It's really top heavy up here with that, whole kind of antique fall foliage type of structuring. So this one right here, this paper here is going for these, I don't know, whatever violet mauve tones here, which will be a little bit different from my first two experiments that were more of the kind of warmer orange tones. Okay, let's see here. Like so. I usually have a piece of plastic on the back of this. This is my tack and peel on one side of the acrylic block, but I've just been keeping my Seaside Cove back here. I just took it off just so I could see my Seaside Cove small like that. All right, so I just re-inked my black pad, so that came out pretty dark right there. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. Or neutral, doesn't matter. I don't know. I didn't. My first initial test last night where my pad wasn't quite, super juicy, so some of my imagery stamped out a little bit lighter. But in some ways that might have been good because it looks farther back in the distance, and it blends in with this aged paper look. It's supposed to be like the darkest areas up here, kind of more of like a 90% gray. This one's pretty dark right here, so we'll see how if that works out or not. I mean, it's one of those things you can make it work, but just is inherently would have been better if it was a little bit lighter. And that one's a little bit lighter. I don't know. I didn't hold it down for quite as long. But I think that looks pretty decent. We'll just bring up the tones a little bit more in the background to match the darkness of this, the value of the imagery right here. Okay, so I think, I wasn't quite sure if I have kind of a violet toned ink here, let me see if I can find something. A lot of my ink pads are really getting somewhat tweaked from age. This is like a 30-year-old pad. Yeah, that pad is just kind of whatever, concave. Let me go for my memento here. I'm looking for something within the color scheme of the paper. It doesn't have to be a specific color within there. I mean, maybe the dominant one would be a better, choice here. But see, that something like that matches the color of those leaves right there. And when you're using different types of colors within a color scheme like that, the lighter tones within that range usually represent something a little bit farther back in the distance. Not always like that. I mean, that color is kind of similar to that one, but I can see that color here and back in here, and it's not something in the foreground. It seems like the lighter tones right in here are a little bit closer to us. Okay, so basically, something like a purple like that, or this like plum color could represent something a little bit more distant. And that's what we're going to be doing here. So we'll go for another image, like right in here, or you can use the smaller one in here, like that. Maybe I'll use the smaller one. I could just, well, let me see. You can do this like multiple times too, but let's use maybe both. Okay, now I'll show you my trick as far as utilizing a certain tone and getting multiple values out of it. I do this all the time, especially with objects that are farther back in the distance from another similar type of object closer to us. Okay, so these tree lines right here are similar to those tree lines right there. But what I'm going to do is we're going to mop off some of this lower portion. That ink pad looked pretty wet, so I'm going to take off a good amount of it. And then I'm going to take off a pretty good amount down here. But I'm not pressing hard. I'm just touching the surface, okay? So I'm removing more off the bottom, then a little bit less right here, a little bit less right here, and then it's just straight up top. I don't know, there's probably like a ½ inch or so of just straight ink, okay? And hopefully I've removed enough ink. Sometimes I don't remove enough. I'm going to remove a little bit more over here where it's going to transition into this area. Sometimes I don't remove enough and it comes out a little bit darker than what I expect it to come out as. And I mean, that's just, you can adjust it later with, things like I do with white ink. But if you can get something inherently within the impression, it just makes your After Effects, much easier to do. So see that right there? How that just transitions right there. Otherwise, it would be that dark right there, and then there'd be a harsh line like that. And see where I've mopped it off a little bit down here, and it's darker up here? That way, it doesn't kind of interfere with the silhouette of the foreground like that, and it looks farther back in space. Look at that. Color worked out pretty good. It's really similar to that one right there. Okay, let's do some more right back in here. Another impression. And just approach it the same way. You can kind of mop off a little bit like that, and then remove a little bit more. And the easiest thing is like, if someone's not sure about it, you want to get a feel of it, just do a test impression of it first. Down here, then you can know if you need to adjust it. How wet your pad is going to affect how much you take off of here too, and what type of ink you're using. If you're using dye-based inks like this that are fairly thin, maybe you remove off a certain amount of it. Maybe if you're going with a thicker ink like a VersaFine Clair or something like that, a thick pigment ink, maybe you have to remove off a little bit more for it to print out varied. Okay, let's go that right here. All right. So you get these kind of nice, I don't know, there's some nice depth in there, I think. And this going over here, that really helped that transition into this area here. I don't feel I need another darker object down here. I might want a little bit of foreground, but I don't need like larger trees like right here to balance off that other side. Okay, now one of the things I've done here, or I've grabbed, are some pencils that are kind of within the color scheme of this piece right here. Now, I didn't grab like a, I don't know, like a, well, I don't know. Here, I took this out the other day, but see, if I color with this one right here, this is kind of this color right here, and it's definitely within the color scheme. But if I color anything with this light tone that's that same color, it's not going to show up at all. So you go with colors that are a little bit darker than that color scheme down there. And we'll have to blend in with some black as well, so we'll mix that into the value range here. And before I do that, let's see, let's go with I'll go with the one of the moose here. I'm gonna go with it looking this way, maybe. With it right down here. Kind of the farther up you stamp this, the smaller the trees are going to be in reference to it. See, if I stamp this moose here, that we're saying that this trees right here are like, I don't know, 15 feet tall or something. That moose are pretty big, but if I stamp it lower like this, those trees can have, a little bit of a sense of grandeur, or I don't know, not really that big, but if you stamp it right down here, in relation, that those trees might be 30 feet or something like that instead of 15 feet if I stamp it like we're way up here. Wipe it off. I'll transition the shadow a little bit, where it's kind of varied in value. All right, now I'm looking at this, and I think I do want some foreground in here. I'll just go over some of these rocks like this to give us a little bit of a kind of a feeling that that's our vantage point looking into the scene. Okay. I could come up with another one over here. Maybe I will do that. I'll just use a little piece of this boulders with lichen. Make sure I inked up the right area. That, and let's see. I want to bring this over here a little bit more. it was a tiny bit. I thought it was stamping a little bit more, but that's fine. All right, so we're looking off like a little ledge here. And what I've been doing is I've been using a lot of this little Tiny Rock small texture stamp, like that, just right around our object to anchor them in the, down into that foundation there. And of course, if that moose is standing like that, we know that this water down here is a little bit more shallow, probably, than, I don't know, most of the rest of the lake area. So having these little textural references to that helps a little bit, because you can see, underneath the water a little bit more, or the I don't know, you can see the surface underneath the water, with those rocks like that. So utilize kind of the drier impressions of it too. So you get those lighter impressions like that. Okay, well, let's see. Let's go into this and let's bring some of these colored elements into it. We'll color up some of these trees in here. It's fairly dark in here, so I think we'll be using a pretty decent amount of acrylic paint pens as well. Okay, I don't have a big range of tones with my purple colored pencils here. I do have a full set of watercolor pencils that I might use as well. Well, let's see if we can get some of these colors into our color scheme here, or into our objects, thus relating them to the color scheme. This is like a pale violet, lavender, it's called. So we're going more of monochromatic. I'm not coloring these trees green. I mean, you can try something like that. I did have a little bit of a green element in my more kind of warmer tone beige types of things, having this green down here like that. It's just kind of a hint of it, and it made it kind of glow a little bit. But I think I'm just going to stick to this general color scheme right here. Okay, now I didn't draw in the shadows, the reflections of these images, because I wanted more foundational imagery in my set than to just do the reflections. It would have been half as many designs had I done the reflections. So what I do is I just anchor these out with some shadows. In other words, I kind of darken the base of them a little bit like this. And then I have a trail, not a trail, but a transitioning shadow, I guess, area down this way, okay? The farther away it is, kind of the shorter the shadow area is. So these ones right here, you can darken all the way down there if you want to, but these ones, the distance, it's only going to be at most the equivalent of the height of the trees there, bringing it like right around here. But I'm not going to do that. I just want to anchor this a little bit more and staying within the color scheme of the paper. You see these trees in here, I'm just giving them a little bit more shading in the darker area. This is a fairly dark color right here. I'm using it fairly lightly though, with a light touch to get a lighter value out of it. See a little tinge of color right there, darkness. It's kind of anchoring the imagery down into the scene ever so slightly. Black is going to, do most of the heavy lifting as far as that goes, though. It'll really anchor our black, colored pencil will anchor a black impression. Okay, now we're bringing that up there. Sometimes I forget to do my foreground elements right here. We'll do kind of the bottom side of some of these rocks. And we can anchor our moose with some of that tone. And here's this, what is this? Tuscan red. It's kind of magenta-ish. I can feel the, it looks like I've never used this before, or hardly ever used it. The pencil wax, I guess. It's not really lead, right? It feels harder than the other two so far. See, when you do those multiple tones like that, it gives it a lot of, those shaded areas, a lot of body. It looks like this color right here is similar to this color right in here. Now I need to trail this off from the, whatever, point of emanation, which is the base of the shoreline there. A little bit more because I still have black to go, and black's going to be kind of like right up here, so I need, some of these other colors reflecting lower. Because I need, because I need room for that black to go. Okay, I'm gonna go with black right here. And this is where, kind of for me, it really starts to come together as far as the shading goes a lot of times when I get to that darker tone. That's equal to, if not the same as, the color that I stamp these objects in. So see that black right there? It just kind of anchors the piece. Even though I'm not using it as black, I'm using it more as gray, but it's related to black. It's just a lighter version of that hue or value. All right, so see how that kind of just anchors that scene down. See, right over here, it seems, it's still floating a little bit, but you do a little bit of this tone right in here. Like this. And it feels like, to me, it feels like the objects are sitting in the scene a little bit more. You're giving them kind of visual weight by doing this. And try to transition it. You really utilize your, I don't know, 5% values, pressure, and build it up. It doesn't take long to do it. I'm doing it for this entire tree here, and it just takes a few seconds. You don't need to do it in one. Then you'll be doing like this, and that's hard to kind of blend in. But if you're just using a light touch like this, it's easier to do. Modeling the rocks. Moose shadow. Kind of, by the time you get to this real dark color, if you want your rocks to look kind of modeled and three-dimensional, remember not to just color them all in. Leave portions of them lighter. See, so right here, I kind of went up here, but this top portion is largely uncolored, not colored. See this one right here? It's just a tiny strip of that lightness because I colored half of the rock that I could see. All right. Let's see, I might be able to use some different colors here, but here's white. White just kind of gets to the point really fast. I'll go with the, I think these two colors, I think these are the same color here, just one is a new model, barrel model of the Artistro extra fine colored pencils here. Okay. Let's get some highlights into these trees and give them a little bit more dimension. It's fairly subtle, but unlike yesterday, I can really see this color of pen here pretty easily. The papers yesterday that I was working on were a lot lighter, so this color on top of a lighter tone didn't really stand out by contrast enough, so I just went with the white, for most of my highlighting. This one will probably be the dominant highlighting color for this piece, just because it's so dark right in here. And this is standing out, enough, again, by contrast. Highlight on the tops of some of these rocks a little bit. So these ones I defined lighting, for the most part by not coloring the top of the rock. In here, where it's just inherently darker, I have to kind of, introduce that lightness onto the rock because it's already, dark. So adding a little bit of extra highlighting right in there. And see, I added some of that down in that water as well to, kind of reference what's going on up in the design. Okay, and adding in some of the trunks back into the tree. I mean, you kind of see them here. Yesterday when I was doing it, I couldn't really see the trunks too much because it was fairly light. But in here, I can see where they are, and I'm just kind of reiterating. I'm going right into those lines. If I can't see, sometimes I just invent it. I'll put a line anywhere. All right, so see, we can see these trunks in here stand out a little bit more. There's a little bit more body and substance to the tree, and you can do like a little highlight down here, or not highlight, but reflection. Like that. See that little reflection down there? And it really makes the this area down here seem like water a little bit more when you have these reflections going like that. And there you get it like that. It's kind of subtle. Here, there's a little bit of a bigger one here. Here's one up here. See, these little swags here have a little bit of a highlight I just noticed on it, just inherently on the paper, but you can go in and kind of add a little bit more if you want to. Okay, taking a look around here, I'm trying to decide if I want anything else. I think I want a quote stamp, but we'll add that in later. And I'm thinking the quote would be good in this color ink right in here, but let's add a little bit of atmosphere into the scene with the use of some white pigment ink. And this is one of the things that I had the biggest kind of question about, is whether I can add white into these papers, because there's not really a lot of white, if any, inherent in these papers right here. So sometimes when you add white into a surface, or white that represents like fog and mist, if there isn't something that's already of that same value, fairly light like that, sometimes it looks kind of strange. Unless you add in like a full moon and it's in white as well, the light source is within the scene and it's white. But anyways, I found that using this white ink was no problem on here. It's you're just dabbing it in there, so the colors underneath this white, are still showing. So it harmonizes pretty well with the paper. Remember how I wiped off the bottom of this one right here, where it's lighter? Well, you can make it kind of a little bit lighter with some additional pigment ink if you want, like that. And then let's add in some right around the base of our moose here. Moose and reflection. let me take a look and see what, if any, quote stamp I'll be using in here. I don't know. I guess right in here, but I can't do it in that color. I'd have to go in black right there, but I don't know. Let's see if I can find something that would be suitable in here. I'm not sure. Or it might be something where I just put it up here, but on a separate piece of paper in here. I'm not sure if something in here would be good or not. Let me see what I can find. Okay, I've taken a look at some quote stamps from the Scenic Sentiment, and I thought about putting something right up here on a separate piece of paper. But then, I don't know, I looked at it again and I thought, I don't know, there's a certain type of mood to this. And sometimes the Scenic Sentiment, or oftentimes the Scenic Sentiment quote stamps can kind of enhance that, whatever, the sensibility that you're going after. And then I thought, maybe I can add in some additional leaves, so I trimmed some out of, one of the other pieces of paper. And I thought that I could add these in here and glue them over the top like this, and then have a little bit more kind of an integration of the papers in here. But then I thought, I don't know if I want to do that. I think that would look okay like that. But I didn't want to cover up this too much. Now, I could cut out smaller ones around here, but I thought having kind of going for a little bit of a different scale would be kind of cool. Even something like that, might look kind of interesting. I don't know. It needs a little bit more in here. But then I thought, I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it open like that. I like kind of some of the things that are going on here. I'll save these for, some image in another scene in the future where we can have some of this element. And when you put them over the top of something like this, it kind of integrates the stamped imagery into the scene a little bit more by just having, another element right over the top of it. So, I don't know. We'll figure out a usage for those in the future, but I think that that'll come into play at some point in time. So I'm just going to leave it as is. I thought about like a quote stamp over here or in here. This is too central. You want it off maybe on the edge, but I thought, you have this object right over here. If anything, I would go for, another moose or something like that out in the distance, like over here. A smaller one. But then I thought, I don't know if I want that. Yeah. A little kayaker would kind of be interesting in there, but then I don't know. Actually, kind of going paddling this way would be kind of interesting. But I don't know. When you add a person into the scene, I don't know, it changes things a little bit in terms of feel. So I wasn't quite sure about that. I don't know, I like it as is, but I don't know, just working on this really large piece like this I'm probably thinking to myself that this didn't take enough time from, the full-size pieces I'm used to doing, where I'm filling everything in. So I don't know, like what is it, 40 minutes here? That's pretty fast for a full page piece, but I guess it's really half a piece in terms of the application of what you're doing here, because half of the scene's already kind of taken care of with this swag that's in here. So anyway, I'll leave it at that right there. I might add something else, if it occurs to me at some later time, but pretty fun. A few tools here that we've utilized in here. I didn't use the white too. I don't think I'm going to, but I don't know, what was it, like 4 or I don't know, maybe there was more colored pencils than that. A tan colored or beige-ish colored warm tone acrylic paint pen. You can use white too. And then some of the white pigment ink as far as coloring goes. So pretty fun. So the thing that I want to do on this paper, because I think it's thick enough to be able to handle it, I want to try some of those watercolor pencils in here. Add some coloring, put a little bit of wash on it with some water on a brush, and see how that goes. I don't know if we'll be able to see it at all because everything's already kind of, there's already those types of effects already inherently in the paper itself. So, but maybe it would integrate our imagery in there, maybe a little bit more of an impressionistic look. We'll see. So, other experiments to come. Here's your full-size first experiment on this paper. Pretty fun to do. Thanks for watching.